Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. This week, we are looking at one of the most surprising box office weekends in a very long time. Surprising in a good way. A lot of times this year, movies have come in lower than we expected. This past weekend, a movie came in much, much higher than anybody saw coming. So we're going to break that down, as well as a story that many of you have flagged to me through various forms of social media, YouTube comments, etc., about, yes, Superman. I think maybe this is the last deep dive we'll do on Superman, but I thought it was significant, so we're going to talk about that. But before we do, let's look at the box office for this past weekend. And the number one movie was The Conjuring, Last Rites. That's no surprise. What is surprising is the total, $84 million. It was expected to open maybe around the $40 million range, but this movie absolutely caught fire, and we're going to get to the rest of the top 10, but I want to dive deep into this right now because, I've been doing this on the air for a little less than 10 years, and there are times when a movie does a little bit better than I expected, or, oh, wow, yeah, no, it really kind of went to the upper range of what we thought it would. This is one of the very few times where I am completely answerless as to exactly what happened here. Nobody expected the movie not only to do this well, but to do even close to this well. So let's see a few of the marks that The Conjuring Last Rites set this past weekend. First of all, it is the 8th best domestic opening weekend of the year, ahead of Thunderbolts and Mission Impossible. It's right up there, really just behind How to Train Your Dragon, in the same range as Captain America Brave New World and Jurassic World Rebirth. It was the best horror opening of the year at $84 million. That absolutely demolishes the previous movie that had that spot, which was Final Destination Bloodlines at $51.6 million. Then we have Sinners and Weapons, followed by 28 years later. But those top four movies right there, all Warner Brothers movies. I don't know what monkey's paw or cursed artifact David Zaslav wished on early this year, but whatever it is, it's working. We're at the part of the curse or the wish where things are going good. I just don't want to know what the other side of this is going to be, because Warner Brothers is absolutely on fire right now. The Conjuring Last Rites also had the third best opening weekend domestically for a horror movie ever. And I finally was able to come up with a metric to determine what's horror and what's not. It's actually the same metric I used when I was doing the A24 horror movie ranking, which is I looked at 4 different sources: IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, Letterboxd, and Metacritic. And if 3 of those 4 sources list a movie as a horror movie, then it goes towards this list. It's the closest I can find to an objective metric to a genre that is maybe the most subjective in all of film. The only 2 horror movies that have opened higher than The Conjuring Last Rites are It back in 2017 and It Chapter 2 back in 2019, both, by the way, Warner Brothers movies. That's it. The Conjuring Last Rites is in third place, ahead of Five Nights at Freddy's, I Am Legend, 2018's Halloween, Us, World War Z, The Nun, also in the Conjuring universe, and Paranormal Activity 3. And when you adjust for inflation domestically, it's still in the top 10. It is still at number 1. I Am Legend is at number 2 with an adjusted total around $122 million. Then we have It Chapter 2, 2018's Halloween, and World War Z rounding out the top 5. Us is at number 6, followed by Five Nights at Freddy's, but there is The Conjuring at number 8, ahead of Interview with the Vampire back in 1994, and Paranormal Activity 3 still holding down that number 10 spot. The Conjuring was also the 4th best opening ever in the month of September. It came in behind only It Chapter 2, and last year's Beetlejuice. It opened bigger than Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, The Nun, Hotel Transylvania 2, Hotel Transylvania, Insidious Chapter 2, and Kingsman: The Golden Circle. And when we look at the Conjuring universe, it was by far the biggest opening in the franchise's history, over $30 million ahead of what was once first place, which is The Nun back in 2018 at $53.8 million. The original Conjuring is in third, followed by The Conjuring 2, Annabelle Creation, The Nun 2, The Curse of La Llorona, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and Annabelle Comes Home. And look at where The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It is, at number 9 on this list at $24.1 million. Now, it is important to note that this was during HBO Max's big Project Popcorn, which means it was available day and date. So obviously there were many people that didn't go to the theater to see the last Conjuring film because they were watching it at home. But even if you triple the opening weekend of the last Conjuring movie, it still doesn't get you to where this one opened. Look at a movie like The Nun 2. That movie opened to $32.6 million just a couple of years ago. There were no tea leaves indicating that The Conjuring Last Rites was going to do what it did. When you adjust for inflation, The Conjuring Last Rites is still at number one, about $16 million ahead of The Nun, followed by The Conjuring, Annabelle, and The Conjuring 2. Basically, that's the same list, except that I think Annabelle and The Conjuring 2 switched places. And usually I'm able to research this or pull up a statistic that'll explain what happened, or say, well, many people didn't see this coming, but this is why we should have. I've got nothing. I have absolutely nothing on this movie. I even went to see it on Sunday night after the numbers came in because I was like, wow, that movie opened huge. It must be a lot better than the last film, or maybe even the best of all the Conjuring movies. And I thought it was okay. It was better than the third one. I didn't think it was as good as the first movie or the second movie. It had the lowest cinema score of any of the Conjuring films proper. It had a B cinema score, which is high for a horror movie, but the lowest of the 4 Conjuring movies, which means that word of mouth wasn't particularly great. Reviews were just about where the last Conjuring movie was. The closest I could come was looking at the demographics for the movie. The turnout was 51% female and 43% Hispanic. And we've talked about on the show before that a lot of times these big surprise hits are because the movies turned out women at higher numbers than expected, and often Hispanic audiences at higher numbers than expected. But again, I don't understand why that only translates to this movie and not some of the other movies in the franchise. It's just a very fluky, weird thing. It's great for the box office to have a hit like this. Last week's show, I think I talked about the fact that September doesn't have a box office juggernaut, and we're going to be looking at a big dive because we don't have a Beetlejuice type movie. And even though this movie didn't open quite as big as Beetlejuice 2 did last year, this is still a shot in the arm for theater owners for the overall box office. It could help tide us over until we get to some of the bigger movies later in the year. But this is just a case where I have no answers for you. I am as surprised as everybody else. I think this might be a top 5 story for me, box office wise, as far as most surprising since I've been doing this. It is absolutely wild. Looking at the rest of the top 5, for the second week in a row, the number 2 movie is a re-release, although this movie technically was never in theaters. Hamilton, which was originally slated for theatrical release back in 2020, finally made its way to theaters and brought in $10.1 million. In third place, we have another Warner Brothers horror film, Weapons. In its 5th week, it dropped 50% and brought in another $5.2 million. Freakier Friday still hanging in there pretty well. It brought in $3.8 million, followed by Caught Stealing. I was really hoping this movie would have a better hold in week 2, but it dropped 59.2% for a $3.1 million weekend. It's at $14.8 million domestic, so I guess we're just going to have to hope that it finds its audience on streaming. In 6th place, we had The Fantastic Four: First Steps in its 7th week of release with a 42.7% drop and a $2.8 million weekend. The Roses in week number 2 had a 56.1% drop, very close behind The Fantastic Four: First Steps. I think they actually switched places once the actual numbers came in. The Bad Guys 2, not too far behind at $2.5 million at number 8. Light of the World, which is an animated film about Jesus, came in 9th place at $2.4 million. And spending a 9th week in the top 10 is Superman. It came in under $1 million, but that was good enough to stay in the top 10. It's at $353.2 million domestically. And when we look at the movies this year, the releases in 2025 that have spent the longest time in the domestic top 10, I redesigned this graphic because the other one was pretty messy. 3 films have been in the top 10 for 9 weeks: Sinners, Lilo and Stitch, and now Superman. That leaves 7 films all tied for 2nd place that have been in the domestic top 10 for 8 weeks. 2 movies were in the top 10 for 7 weeks, one of them Days and The Fantastic Four: First Steps. If Fantastic Four can stick around for one more week, then it'll join that 2nd place club. And then 4 movies have been in the top 10 for 6 weeks so far this year: The Bad Guys 2, Final Destination Bloodlines, Thunderbolts, and The Amateur, strangely taking advantage of a slow spring box office. And I'm glad that Superman stuck around in the top 10 because it ties into another story that I wanted to talk about, which is some reporting that was done in Variety yesterday. And I almost immediately started hearing about it. I was reading articles on Reddit because I read about box office and movie stuff there, and ran across my name just in the wild twice. People tagged me on social media. I got YouTube comments because they wanted to know about a discrepancy between my numbers on Superman's theatrical profitability and Variety's reporting on Superman's theatrical profitability. So here's what the article said. It was about the fact that Warner Brothers has now had 7 movies in a row debut to $40+ million. That's a record that's never been done before. And in the body of that article, it talked about the profitability of those movies, and they said that Sinners is expected to gross around $60 million in theatrical profits, Superman around $125 million, Final Destination Bloodlines at approximately $75 million, and Weapons at $65 million and counting, according to, quote, knowledgeable individuals. And people wanted to know what I thought about that because I do my own profitability estimates on the show, and I've been very clear about the fact that I think that Superman is a success, but according to my estimates, Superman had not yet broken even in the theatrical window. It was about $75 million short, and yet here we had an article saying that Superman was going to clear $125 million. So I was trying to figure out exactly how they might have come to those numbers in the article, and my first thought was that maybe the people over at Variety, the sources that were giving them those theatrical profitability numbers, were not counting the marketing budget towards the expenses of the film like I do, but that theory fell apart the more I looked into it. So here's a breakdown of the 4 movies that were mentioned in the story. First of all, let's start with Sinners. According to my numbers, and again, those are my estimates based on the formula that I have as far as money that goes back to the studio against the budget as well as the marketing costs, I estimated that the movie was going to be about $45.7 million profitable in the theatrical window. Variety said $60 million. Now, if I eliminated marketing from my own calculations, I come in above Variety's number at $95.7 million. For Superman, I estimated that it had not yet broken even theatrically, yet Variety said that it was going to make $125 million in profit, so basically $200 million more profitable than I have. Even if I were to take marketing out of my equations for Superman, that would only make it profitable by $76 million, about $50 million shy of where Variety has it. For Final Destination Bloodlines, I had it profitable to the tune of about $36.6 million. Variety said $75 million. If I remove marketing from my estimates, I'm above Variety's number at $86.6 million. But strangely, with Weapons, I was pretty much right on with my calculations. I estimated right now that it's $65.1 million profitable in the theatrical window. Variety estimated $65 million. I'm above Variety's number if I take marketing out at $85.1 million. So the only consistent thing with those numbers is that Variety's profitability was way above mine, and in a way that didn't actually coincide with them just not counting marketing. The numbers were too far off. So I sat down and I tried to figure out why exactly, if these numbers are accurate, and there's no reason to assume that they're not, why are my numbers so far off from the reported Variety numbers? And I came up with some theories. Number one, it could be that my models are just wrong, especially on big budget movies like Superman, particularly on domestic revenue split with theaters. I've had plenty of people say that I'm underestimating that number. I arrived at that based on research, but it's very possible that could be low on my side. Number two, it could be that Variety sources may not be including marketing costs in their profitability calculations, but again, my numbers are still off, even if you remove marketing from the equation. Number three could be that I'm overestimating or reporting overestimations of marketing for the big movies like Superman, Sinners, and Final Destination Bloodlines, meaning that I am attributing more marketing costs to those movies than they actually spent, and that I underestimated the marketing for Weapons. I had it at about $20 million. If they'd spent more, then my numbers might coincide a little bit more. The fourth possibility is that Variety sources may be reporting numbers that are better for Warner Brothers to have circulated in the press, i.e. those aren't the correct numbers. And then we have the most likely scenario, which is that it's some combination of all of those things. But based on my own review of the numbers, I really can't draw a conclusion other than that there are likely flaws in my profitability model which increase with the budget or size of the movie. So they're more accurate for smaller films, but less accurate for big movies like Superman. And if you watch this channel and you listen to me every week, you know that I take this sort of thing very seriously. I work very hard to make sure that the information that I'm presenting on this show is accurate, and particularly with Superman, I have seen my profitability numbers floating around in all kinds of places. Some people saying that they are wrong, some people saying that they're right, some people using them as a defense, some people using them as a weapon against Superman or as a weapon against Man of Steel. And I guess it's good exposure for the show, although I often found that they were presented without the proper context, or that people would say like, well, these aren't right because he's not counting ancillary revenue, even though I say on the graphic that I'm not counting ancillary revenue. But I was okay with those discrepancies because I had faith that my numbers were at least reasonably accurate, because I didn't just invent that formula. I did a lot of research. That was the best formula I could come up with. But this is the first time that I've seen reporting, especially regarding theatrical profitability, that so heavily contradicts my numbers and in a way that I can't resolve. I can't make it right. I can't figure out what the variable is. The only variable, or the most likely variable, seems to be that there is something wrong with my formula. And I've said many times on this show that I'm accountable for what I say. If I make a mistake, then I want people to call me on it. Although the little ticky-tack ones, I think you could maybe skip. But generally, I don't want to be somebody that's putting information out there that is not accurate, because quite frankly, there are a lot of people that do that. They put inaccurate information out there with impunity. Some people, that's how they run their enterprise. They thrive on putting out inaccurate information. I try to be a counterbalance to that. I want to try to provide the most accurate information that I possibly can to clarify a situation, not to make it more muddy. And this has really given me pause regarding these profitability estimates, because I always knew that there were variables and I tried to correct for them as best I could. But I'm looking now at the fact that there may be more variables than I can correct for. And when you combine that particularly with the way that my profitability estimates have been used in many cases for Superman, where it's not been presented as clarifying information, but often as information that will further inflame a war of words that does not need to be inflamed. And the result of all of that is that I think that it's probably best for me for now to drop the profitability estimates on the show until such time as I can find something that I have much more faith in, other than just based on my own research. But I don't think I'm going to be presenting the specific dollar information on the show anymore, because I want to use this platform responsibly. And if there is something wrong with my calculation and I am putting stuff out there that's not accurate, I don't want to now be doing it willingly. I don't think that it changes my overall analysis of Superman. If it made $125 million in theatrical profits, that makes it a success. I already said that I think that the movie was a success. It's just more successful theatrically than I gave it credit for. So we're going to put a pin in that for now. We're going to come back to it later. And really what it comes down to is I want to be a reliable and accurate source, even if that means kind of looking in the mirror and saying, okay, you know what? Maybe it's time to change a little bit of how I do things. Let's move on to the rest of the box office for this past weekend. Dropping out of the top 10 this past week was The Naked Gun after 5 weeks. Nobody 2 is out after 3 weeks. And Jaws, the 50th anniversary re-release, actually almost stayed in the top 10. It was right behind Superman, but it's out after 1 week. And looking at the biggest theater count changes this past weekend, Lilo and Stitch had a big expansion. It has not yet taken that #1 domestic spot, but it had a big contraction this past weekend. It lost 2,110 theaters. It's now back in 330. Nobody 2 lost a big chunk of theaters, 1,553 of them. It's out of wide release in 949 theaters. The Toxic Avenger really got kicked to the curb after just 1 weekend because Cineverse is not as big a distributor as the other studios. They don't have the leverage for those 2-week guarantees. So it lost 1,289 theaters. It's now in 706. Honey Don't lost 1,148 theaters, almost out of release completely. It's only in 190. And the Jaws re-release lost 1,100 theaters, but it's still in about 2,100 nationwide. This is what I call our road to recovery. The blue line is the box office weekend average for 2015 to 2019. The red line is the average for 2021 to 2024. And the dotted black line is this past weekend. And I think that this really actually tells the story of what we've seen at the box office all summer, which is that The Conjuring Last Rites had an opening beyond what anybody could possibly imagine, one of the most surprising openings of the year, and yet it still only got our weekend box office total basically back up to the average where we were pre-pandemic. That's because we don't really have a bench behind what movie, or maybe at the time 2 movies, are succeeding at any given time. And so while this was a nice big boost to The Conjuring and it got us above our post-pandemic average, it still didn't get us above where we were. But hey, at least we're there. Looking at the biggest per theater averages from this past weekend, at number 1 was Yi Yi. This is a re-release of the 2000 film from director Edward Yang. In the 25 years since its initial release, Yi Yi has steadily been rising up the lists as one of the greatest movies of the modern era, maybe of all time, so sort of a new cinematic classic there, re-released for its 25th anniversary. The Conjuring Last Rites comes in second place, bringing in just over $22,000 per theater in 3,800 theaters. In third place was a one-theater re-release of Four Nights of a Dreamer, which is one of the lesser-known films from French director Robert Bresson. In fourth place, we have Linda, 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 which brought in just over $11,000 in one theater. This is a 20th anniversary re-release of the film from Japanese director Nobuhiro Yamashita. And in fifth place, playing in 2 theaters, is the documentary Riefenstahl, which is about Leni Riefenstahl, who documented, of course, the rise of the Nazi regime, triumph of the will, etc. And the movie is an analysis about her claims that she was unaware of the horrors that the Nazis were responsible for. Looking at the biggest films in limited release, at number 1 was Splitsville, which expanded to 800 theaters and brought in $800,000. In second place was The Threesome, which is a movie that was actually shot right here in Arkansas. It's from director Chad Hartigan about a man who accidentally gets both girls that he was with in a menage a trois pregnant. In third place is Twinless, which opened in 568 theaters to just over $500,000. In fourth, we have Loka Chapter 1 Chandra, which is a film from India about a woman who discovers that she has superpowers. It brought in about $450,000. And in fifth place is Madharasi in an unknown number of theaters. It brought in around $436,000. And it's a Tamil language film from India about a man out to stop a cache of weapons from falling into the wrong hands. Looking at the top 5 films internationally, meaning all movies not in the US and Canada, The Conjuring Last Rites also blew the doors off around the world, bringing in $110 million. So this was not just domestic, this was around the world as well. In second place is Demon Slayer Infinity Castle, which brought in another $12.4 million. It's going to have a big weekend coming up as it opens here in the United States. The Shadow's Edge dropped 55.6% and brought in $11.8 million. The Chinese animated film Nobody brought in $8.2 million, and Madharasi brought in $6.8 million. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get our top 5 films around the world. And at number 1 was The Conjuring Last Rites at just over $194 million in its opening weekend. We're going to break down the numbers more specifically, but I can tell you right now, that is the biggest opening weekend worldwide for a horror movie ever. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle comes in second place with another $12.3 million. It is approaching the $300 million mark worldwide. The Shadow's Edge is at $11.8 million. It's close to $150 million worldwide. Then we have the domestic release of Hamilton at $10.1 million in fourth place, and Weapons holding down the fifth spot at $9.8 million. Its worldwide gross is now over $250 million. And if there's somebody out there who placed a bet early in 2025 that The Conjuring Last Rites would have a bigger opening weekend than both Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning and Captain America: Brave New World, then you are a very happy person right now, because the reportedly last Conjuring movie opened bigger than the last Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie. That's crazy to me. It's at number 8 for the year. It was also very close to the opening of How to Train Your Dragon. Look at those other movies, and then you have The Conjuring there, which is, by the way, by far the cheapest of any of those movies by a degree of $100+ million. And this was, as I mentioned, the biggest opening all time worldwide for a horror film, as best I could gather. Worldwide records actually aren't kept very well, but I did some research, and The Conjuring Last Rites was able to edge out the first It film, which opened to $189.7 million. It Chapter 2 opened to $185 million. 2017's The Mummy is in fourth place at $172.4 million. It was much bigger internationally than it was domestically. Fun fact, as I was doing my qualification for what's horror and what's not, 2017's The Mummy does count as a horror movie. 1999's The Mummy does not, although when you think about those two movies, I think that actually makes sense. In fifth place, we had The Meg, which opened to $146.9 million. Then we had The Nun at $133.1 million. Five Nights at Freddy's at $132.6 million. World War Z at $129 112.2 million, Alien Romulus at 108.7 million, and Final Destination Bloodlines rounding out the top 10 at $102.6 million. Well, I mentioned earlier that Warner Brothers has now had 7 movies open to $40+ million in a row, which no studio has ever done. But back when Weapons opened, I mentioned that Disney would have had that streak if they hadn't acquired 20th Century Fox and had Dark Phoenix come out in 2019 and broken that $40+ million opening streak. So this week's Charts with Dan trivia question is, in 2019, Disney had 6 consecutive movies open to $40+ million, not counting 20th Century Fox releases, but they didn't get to 7. What movie broke Disney's $40+ million opening streak back in 2019? I'll give you a second to think of the answer. If you want more time, you can pause the video, but here it is. That movie was Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, which opened to $36.9 million. So even when you discount Dark Phoenix at this point, Warner Brothers still has a record that no other studio can claim. And that also leads us to our Charts with Dan member poll question this week. It's a pretty simple question. It's a yes/no question. Do you think Warner Brothers is going to make it 8 $40+ million openers in a row, with One Battle After Another, which is their next release? It's Paul Thomas Anderson's latest film starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Reviews are starting to come in. They look pretty good. Do you think the streak will continue, or do you think that it will end at 7? Vote now. The answer will be revealed on next week's Charts with Dan. And last week I asked members here, what remaining 2025 release are you most looking forward to? And this was another very close poll. Winning by just a couple of votes was Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. The Running Man, though, comes in second place at 35 votes. Wicked for Good comes in third at 27 votes. Frankenstein from Guillermo del Toro comes in fourth place with 26 votes. And Predator Badlands rounds out the top 5 with 20 votes. No Avatar, Fire and Ash. There's a couple movies I thought would be in that top 5, but these are the ones that my members are most excited about. And if you're interested in becoming a member, but you're not one yet, it's pretty easy to do. Depending on how you're watching the show, there might just be a button that says Become a Member. You can click that, or you can go down to the description below and you can become a member there. You don't just get to vote in the poll every single week. You also get exclusive early access to some of my videos, as well as custom badges and emoji down in the comments section. I would love to hear your voice, because the last couple polls have shown that one vote here or there can make a difference. So that's everything that's going on at the box office. Let's take a look now at the world of streaming. These are the latest numbers from Netflix. New ones are going to hit later today, but this one covers August 25th through the 31st. At number 1, yet again, was K-Pop Demon Hunters. I think this was either its biggest weekend yet or close to it, and it's largely because the sing-along version is included in these numbers. It came in at 30.11 million views. In second place was the debut of the Netflix original movie, The Thursday Murder Club, at 24.65 million views. Then we had the Netflix movie Fall for Me in third place. My Life with the Walter Boys Season 2 debuts in fourth place at 11.81 million views. Hostage comes in fifth place. Abandoned Man, the Netflix original movie, comes in at number 6. Two Graves debuts at number 7 with 8.62 million views. Unknown Numbers at number 8. Wednesday Season 2 is at number 9, and we're going to get our first viewership numbers for this newest batch of episodes that just dropped last week, so that'll be included on next week's show. And at number 10 is the Netflix series Bon Appetit, Your Majesty, with just over 8 million views. And when we look at the most watched programs on Netflix in 2025, Wednesday Season 2 is now up to number 8. That may drop briefly as the watch time expands with the inclusion of those new episodes, but it's going to be on the top 10. Right now, that drops The Lifeless and Exterritorial down to numbers 9 and 10. Of course, K-Pop Demon Hunters still number 1 by over 100 million views. The numbers it's racking up are incredible. And this is what the chart looks like for the most viewed Netflix films since 2021, when Netflix began providing their ratings reports every 6 months. And K-Pop Demon Hunters is already at number 3, which bumps We Can Be Heroes down to number 4. So to put that into context, K-Pop Demon Hunters has been viewed more times in just a couple months than We Can Be Heroes has been viewed since they started reporting data in 2021. That's how popular it is. It's still about 100+ million views away, though, from toppling Red Notice to become Netflix's most viewed film at all since 2021. These are the most viewed Netflix series since 2021 based on their biannual ratings reports, and Squid Game Season 3 has moved into the overall top 10 at 142.41 million views, ahead of The Queen's Gambit and just below Adolescent. So Squid Game Season 3 moving up this chart. And when we look at the most viewed Netflix programs since 2021 overall, K-pop Demon Hunters moves up to number 5. It's very soon to be number 4. And then if it can get up to around 350 million views, then it could compete with Wednesday. Although Wednesday Season 1's numbers are also going to grow once the final ratings come in at the end of the year, because many people rewatched it with the release of Wednesday Season 2. But still, just a phenomenal success for K-pop Demon Hunters, putting up viewership numbers in just a few months that it took other shows and movies a few years to acquire. Let's take a look now at the latest data from Nielsen. Now, this is different from the Netflix numbers because it is domestic only, and it is about a month delayed because that's how long they take to get the numbers out. So these are the 10 most watched streaming movies for August 4th through the 10th. At number 1 is K-pop Demon Hunters with 16.2 million hours watched. Amazon's The Pickup debuts in second place at 10.45 million hours watched, followed by Happy Gilmore 2, Freelance, and My Oxford Year. Kandahar, which is not a Netflix original, it's an older film, debuts in 6th place, followed by Journey to the Mysterious Island. Final Destination Bloodlines on HBO Max is in 8th with about 4.3 million hours watched. Then we have 2025's War of the Worlds just behind Final Destination Bloodlines. And at number 10, for some reason, Gods of Egypt at 4 million hours watched. I guess people watched War of the Worlds and said, you know what, I'd love to watch another terrible movie. These were the most watched streaming shows for August 4th through the 10th. At number 1 was Wednesday. It brought in 62.5 million hours watched. We'll see where that falls in the context of the year overall. In second place, a very respectable second, was the revival of King of the Hill on Hulu at 20.1 million hours watched. Then we have The Hunting Wives at number 3, Bluey at number 4, Sullivan's Crossing returning to the chart at number 5, Paw Patrol returning at number 6, SpongeBob SquarePants returning at number 7, Grey's Anatomy at number 8, The Summer I Turned Pretty at number 9, and Leanne on Netflix rounding out the top 10. And when you look at the biggest streaming series weekly performances for the year, the first week of availability for Wednesday Season 2 had the second best number of the year at 62.5 million hours. That's only behind Squid Game 2, which put up 76.5 million hours watched in the first week of the year from December 30th to January 5th. So Wednesday comes in ahead of the first week of Squid Game 3 and the first couple weeks of The Night Agent Season 2. These were the top streaming shows as far as watch time per available episode. So you take the total hours watched, divide it by the number of episodes you could watch. And over the 12 available episodes for Wednesday Season 1 and 2, each one was watched for an average of 5.21 million hours. That is well above the number 2 show, which is The Hunting Wives at 2.51 million hours per episode. Untamed comes in at 1.56 million hours per episode, and then we have a big drop down to Leanne at 675,000 hours per episode. The Summer I Turned Pretty is at number 5, Ballard is at number 6, Sullivan's Crossing is at number 7, Perfect Match returns at number 8 with just over 200,000 hours watched per episode, The Sandman is at number 9, and Animal Kingdom is at number 10. And when we look at the best performances for a show by the hours watched per episode metric, Wednesday comes in 4th place ahead of the 5.08 million hours per episode watched for Zero Day, but behind the first couple weeks of Untamed and the peak of Adolescence, which brought in just over 6 million hours watched per episode. And that's everything I've got for you this week. Before I go, though, I wanted to draw your attention to a few things you might be interested in watching, both in theaters and at home. First of all, today, premiering on Hulu, is the 5th season of Only Murders in the Building, and then 2 recent releases available for digital sales and premium video on demand, Honey Don't and Weapons, which is still doing well at the box office, but Warner Brothers putting out digitally anyway. On Wednesday, a new documentary debuts on Netflix called AKA Charlie Sheen. If you were around, 10 years or so ago during the absolutely bananas Charlie Sheen times, then I think that this documentary might appeal to you. On Thursday, one of my favorite new shows, it's not new, but I've only started watching it in the last year or so, Taskmaster debuts its 20th series on Channel 4 in the UK, and they will also be running it day and date, meaning the same day on YouTube here in the US and presumably around the world. Also on Thursday, the Season 3 finale of Star Trek Strange New Worlds will air on Paramount+. It's a busy week at theaters. First of all, we have the release of Demon Slayer Infinity Castle. I will be seeing it on Thursday. I already have my ticket. The theater's sold out. You'll have my review on Friday. The Long Walk, which is an adaptation of a Stephen King story, is also hitting theaters this weekend, along with Downton Abbey, the grand finale, and Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues. So a lot of very different options for you to catch if you want to see a movie this weekend. On the re-release side, Toy Story is hitting theaters again for its 30th anniversary, and The Sound of Music is having a 60th anniversary re-release in theaters. On the more limited theatrical release side, Sunfish and Other Stories on Green Lake is hitting a smaller number of theaters. This was a buzzy movie coming out of Sundance early this year. And The History of Sound is also opening in limited release. Paul Mescal and Josh O'Connor play two audio historians who fall in love in World War I era America. And if you want to stay home and watch a movie, Warfare, which I think is a very good movie from earlier this year, is hitting HBO Max. And finally, on Sunday, the Emmys will be airing on CBS. The best in television are getting their trophies, which means like 4 or 5 shows might win. I'll be watching and I'll have a full recap for you on Monday morning. But that's all I've got for you this morning. Thank you so much for watching the show and some of the deep dives that we did this week. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up on this video, hit the bell so you know when I am uploading a new video. But most of all, thank you for watching this video. Be sure to stay tuned right here. I've got a lot more reviews and other stuff this week. I've got my live show on Wednesday and I'm balancing a whole bunch of stuff, but it's all fun stuff. Until next time, stay safe and I'll see you then. Bye.